Welcome to the 67th Annual Sycamore Steam Show, here at the Taylor Marshall Farm. These steam tractors were used by farmers for powering various farm machinery. Most steam tractors were driven by custom operators who traveled the country and charged farmers for their services. A new steam engine tractor was priced between $2,000 and $5,000, so most farmers didn't own them. They were used from the latter part of the 1800s until the internal combustion engines came into being around the 1920s. Steam power was also used in factories and in the construction industry for digging and paving roads. The tractor parade is at 1:30. Enjoy your day here in Sycamore. This tractor is a Keck and Gonnerman two-cylinder steam engine. It has a 2265 horsepower engine and was built in Mount Vernon, Indiana. The pictures are from the 2022 steam show and the video is current. This steam shovel, the Mary Ann, is an Erie Type A, built in 1925. Only 5 are known to exist. It weighs 13 tons and could move 300 cubic yards of material a day. The Mary Ann had a crew of 3, a fireman, engineer, and a groundsman. It is currently under restoration with a new boiler being made in Canada.
Remove your hats, and we're going to have T.C. Bush sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Again, thank you, and welcome to the 67th reunion of the Sycamore Steam Show and Thrashing Bee. Here, our main goal is to highlight our nation's proud industrial past and to put on demonstrations the way they did work 100 years ago on the American farm, highlight our agricultural history. Fittingly so, this machine you see coming up the lane is a very, very rare and special object we are fortunate to have here at the grounds. This is an all-wheel drive Joe Dane John Deere tractor. It has a 4-cylinder Mick Vicker engine. It was built in 1918 during a period of American agricultural design known as the Tractor Wars and the Glorious Nightmare period. They still hadn't settled on a small, compact design that could replace 2 or 3 horses on most American farms, and this was one of John Deere's bids to make it happen. They produced this on their own right as they were beginning to purchase the Waterloo Engine Works of Waterloo, Iowa. Eventually, they decided to recall all of the Joe Dane tractors, round them up, and let them state that they were destroyed. Only 3 got away. One of them is still owned by the Deere Company, one is in a private collection in California, and the only operational one in the world is what you just saw go by you. Very special machine owned by the Northern Illinois Steam Power Club. Next up, we have a unique traction engine. This was built out east in Swanton, Ohio by the A.E. Baker Company. It was known as a uniflow cylinder. Every manufacturer had a different arrangement of valve gears and cylinder usage to try and get the most efficiency and power out of the machine while keeping the fuel bill down. The uniflow cylinder was Baker's bin. If you listen closely to the exhaust sound in comparison to some of the other engines we'll be hearing in a moment, this one has a very unique popping noise, which is indicative of the uniflow design in contrast to the chuck you hear on the rest of the engines. Part of the Peterson collection of Hampshire, Illinois, with Lester Peterson at the throttle. Any whistles? No whistles today, that's okay. Next up, we have another piece of the Peterson collection of Hampshire. This is a very, very special machine. It's actually the engine that started our club. Back in 1955, a group of local farmers in the DeKalb area got together and watched a film produced by the J.I.K. Threshing Machine Company titled When Steam Was King. The film was about old-time threshermen and sort of the preservation of American agricultural history. The Petersons, at the time, had this engine in their collection, decided to pull it out of the barn, and that is how they began their reunions here in Sycamore. Just one engine, one threshing machine, and it spawned into what we do today here. It is a 20 horsepower engine built by the Minneapolis Threshing Machine Company out of Hopkins, Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've got Danny Cork at the throttle today and Sister Sophia at the wheel. Any whistles up there, Danny? One interesting feature about this display is the water tender being towed behind it. Every minute your engine wasn't doing work, be it threshing, pulling a road grader, or running a sawmill, you weren't making money. So people would build water wagons just like this for added coal or wood capacity in addition to water to supplement what was stored on the engine. You could run a little longer while the wagon went to go replenish your supplies. Next up, we have a Frick Eclipse. This is an 8.5 by 10. Frick didn't rate their engines in terms of horsepower, but in terms of the bore and stroke of the cylinders. This is an 8.5-inch bore by 10-inch stroke. It is a double simple engine, meaning that it has 2 cylinders, and steam is only used in each cylinder once before being jettisoned out of the stack. Another such bid to get more power and efficiency out of a different design. This engine is built out east in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. It's a little unusual to have a Frick in this part of the country. We're very happy to have it. It's towing the Peterson's Minneapolis threshing machine behind it. This is the same scene you'd see in the countryside 100 years ago, just as often as you see tractors pulling plows or combines nowadays. This was the equivalent of that 100 years ago. Any whistles up there, guys? Any more? Thanks for bringing it through. Now here we have a very, very special machine. This is the first of our 4 Port Huron 19 and 65 horsepower engines on the grounds this year. This engine is in the hands of the Miller family. We have several generations of the Miller family up there today. Previously, though, it was owned by a very special person in the northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin steam engine community, Mr. Neil Drummer. Unfortunately, Mr. Drummer has left our company. and has gone off to heaven. And we decided it would be a fitting thing to pay a small tribute to him, since he's the reason a lot of younger folks have the means and ability and the love to own steam traction engines of their own. So I was fortunate to go to Neil's home and found a really lovely poem hanging in the barn where this engine was stored for many, many years. So I'd like to read that to you, and we're going to hold the whistle open a little longer than usual, have a memorial whistle for Neil Drummer. The poem, in fond memory of Neil Eugene, whose only love was a steam machine. It was a sorry day when the safety valve stuck, and seemed like it was the end of his luck. The explosion shook our town so fair, and old Neil vanished up in the air. But shed no tear for the event that summer, because he is risen, our friend, Neil Drummer. Thank you for bringing it through, guys. This machine was built in 1920. It was sold out of the Lincoln, Nebraska dealership, and it was the last one ever sold out of that particular dealership. Even by 1920, steam engines were beginning to become obsolete. They were getting a little bit better at perfecting a small gasoline tractor design, and steam engines really only held on because people were more familiar with their operation back in 1920, and because there were still large jobs that they were better suited to do, such as heavy belt work. Next up, we have another long-time attendee of the show here. This is another 20 horsepower Minneapolis, again built in Hopkins, Minnesota. Indicative of the Minneapolis line, there is a large head tank on the engine that says the Minneapolis. That's for extra water storage, so you could run the engine a little bit longer and have a better running operation in general. This machine's owned by the Hendrickson family out of Edgerton, Wisconsin. They're heavily involved with our sister show, which is up in Edgerton, the Rock River Threshery. If you guys enjoy what you see here at the Taylor Marshall Farm today, check out their show. It's over Labor Day weekend, and you'll have just as great of a time as you are today. Another interesting note of the Minneapolis company was their factory in Hopkins was located adjacent to an art college. So note there's a few minor cosmetic differences between this 20-horse Minneapolis and the Petersons we saw earlier. That is because the Minneapolis company hired students from that art college to paint and pinstripe their engines. So no two Minneapolises will appear the same cosmetically. Again, this is a 20-horse Minneapolis built in 1922, owned by the Hendricksons. Another interesting feature of this machine is the screen mesh spark arrestor on top of the smokestack. That was a very elegant solution to an expensive problem if you were running in a dry environment. You didn't want to set the field you were in on fire or your wooden threshing machine, so a simple screen mesh would keep most of the big sparks inside of the engine and save your equipment. Any whistles, Clayton? Alright, thank you. Here, this is another very special machine. This is a 22-horse steam traction engine built by the Illinois Thresher Company of Sycamore, Illinois. If any of you are familiar with the downtown Sycamore, the Blooming Gardens buildings is the remains of the factory where this machine was built. They began production about 1915 and only managed to build 63 engines before going belly up in the mid-1920s. There's only 6 left in existence, two 25 horses, 3 20 horses, and this is the only remaining 22 horse in the world. And we've also got 10-year-old Jonah up there. It's his 10th birthday. Any whistles, guys? All right, proudly owned by the Northern Illinois Steam Power Club. Now here is the second of our 4 Port Huron Longfellow engines. This is another 19 and 65 horsepower model. I've asked our operator Jack and Eric to come through backwards today so you guys in the bleachers can get a view of the engine side of one of these machines. Like we were talking about with the double-cylinder engines and the Baker Uniflow, Port Huron had their own unique spin on how to get the most efficiency out of their fuel. What they did was they had something called a tandem compound. There's only one piston rod to one crank, but there's two cylinders. Physics states that a high pressure in a small diameter is equal in pushing force to a low pressure in a larger diameter. So Port Huron capitalized on that. So how it works, steam leaves the boiler, first enters the small diameter cylinder here, pushes the piston back. Once it's done that, it's lost a little bit of heat energy, is exhausted to the larger cylinder, where it does a second batch of work of equal pushing force at a slightly lower temperature and pressure before ultimately being exhausted out of the stack, which made these some of the most efficient steam engines on the market. Again, we got Jack Stuffle at the throttle today and Eric Sullivan at the wheel. We'll let Jack get started there. These single-cylinder engines can be tricky to get running smoothly since there's a top and bottom dead center. That's a problem you don't have on the double cylinders. Wherever the double-cylinder engines land, there will always be a power stroke. That is not the case with these single-cylinder engines. Any whistles, Jack? This machine was built in 1921. It was sold to a fellow by the name of John Struck. He was so impressed with his machine, he wrote a testimonial letter for the Port Huron Company, and they featured a photograph of this engine in their 1921 sales literature. And this is its first showing at the Sycamore Steam Show in about 20 years. Next up, we have another 1965 horsepower Port Huron. These engines were branded as Longfellow engines because of the abnormally long and slender boiler barrel. Interesting to note is the two horsepower numbers that I've given. The first one, the 19, is a relation of how much heating surface there is in the boiler and its capacity to make steam. The second number, the 65, is what horsepower it can develop off of the belt pulley, the large pulley on the bleacher side of the machine. We've got Chris Corrigan and, Andy out up there today. Any whistles, guys? All right, this is a collection piece of the Runcie family out of Maple Park, built in 1913. Thanks for bringing it through. So we've seen a couple of lesser known brands of engines so far in our parade. What you have up here, though, this is a 50-horse Case steam traction engine. This is a part of the Druin family collection out of Holcomb, Illinois. It was built by the Case Threshing Machine Company out of Racine, Wisconsin. This machine's from 1914. And Case was the most prolific manufacturer of steam traction engines during the age of steam in the United States. And this is one of their more popular models. It's a big medium, so it's well suited to work off the belt pulley. So things like a sawmill or a threshing machine, just as well as it is pulling off the drawbar, i.e. plowing or road grading, etc. We've got the Druin family up there today. Austin's at the throttle, Mike Stinson at the wheel, and their son Warren is riding along in the coal bunker, learning the tools of the trade. An interesting feature of this engine that we've seen a couple of times already is the canopy above the feet. This was an additional cost from the factory. It did not come standard. And it has a happy side effect of sheltering the operator from the elements, but its main purpose was to shelter the equipment from the elements. Any whistles, Austin? All right, thanks for bringing it through, guys. As we've learned, some of the engines are more suited to belt work off of the belt pulley. Others are better suited for pulling. This is one such machine. This is another product of the J.I. Case Company. It's built in 1911, owned by the Coling family out of Lee, Illinois, and it was built to pull and pull a lot. It was retrieved from Canada several years ago, has extensions on the rear wheels for added traction for breaking up the Canadian prairie more than 100 years ago. Another single-cylinder engine. Very wide side stance. It's hard to steer some of these. There's limited amount of visibility when you're in the operator's platform, so it's important for the engineer and the steersman to cooperate and make sure that you can fit where you're trying to go. Any whistles, guys? All right, thanks for bringing it through. During the age of steam, they only built a limited amount of full-size track engines, but when the hobby of preserving these machines began to become popular in the 1950s and 60s, there just simply wasn't enough to go around, or maybe people didn't want a full-size one. What you see here are two half-scale models of a 65 horsepower case. These were built by machinists or hobbyists or anyone who had a passion for steam but didn't have the means or the desire to own a full-size engine of their own. To the bleachers, we have Kevin Palzinski. This is his engine. This first year he's had it here at the show, being displayed in memory of his dad, Phil. And Abe Stevens, this is the second year he's had his machine out here, and he's just finished up a cosmetic restoration of this engine. An interesting feature of Kevin's machine closer to the bleachers there, if you see the silver part of the boiler barrel, that's what's known as a jacket. It's full of insulation, again, to help keep heat in the boiler, which is going to translate into a lower fuel bill. And I don't know how you guys want to divvy this up, but let's hear some whistles. All right, thanks, guys. Next up, we have a 1923 product of the Buffalo Springfield Steamroller Company out of Springfield, Ohio. I believe this is a 9-ton machine. This was a 10-ton machine, my mistake. This is part of the Fruit Family Collection out of Kirkland, Illinois, and as far as we can tell, it's the only operational steamroller in the state of Illinois. These were very, very common in the countryside right around this time, about 100 years ago, when we were beginning to create the first batch of paved roads in the United States. It has a vertical boiler, which was very popular in construction equipment because of its compact design in comparison to the horizontal boilers we've been seeing so far. All right, perfect. Thanks for bringing it through, guys. Steam wasn't just a power source on the American farm, however. There was a lot of small machine shops and grist mills and so on that had small machinery of their own to power their equipment. And this is a conglomeration of such a thing. This is a stationary steam engine with another vertical boiler mounted on a 1960s truck chassis owned by Bob Yelm. 1940s, you say? Okay, my mistake. This is what's known as a steam doodlebug. There's several of these around the country at various shows, many of which are street legal and can reach speeds of up to 40, 45 miles an hour. Any whistles, Bob? All right, thank you. Here we have another product of the Jag Case Threshing Machine Company. This is arguably their most popular model. That is the 65 horsepower case. Again, equipped with an aftermarket spark arrestor on top of the stack and a canopy to protect the machinery. This is a part of the Hubbard family collection out of China, Illinois. An interesting feature some of you may have been wondering about. Above the cylinder there is a device with 3 rotating balls. That is the governor of the engine. It's what controls the speed when the throttle is wide open. The way it works, centripetal force brings the balls further apart, closes a valve inside the steam chest, or inside the governor body itself, which limits the amount of steam that can go into the engine, keeps it from overspeeding. Any whistles up there? Any more? All right, thanks for bringing it through. It's pulling a matching case water wagon. These, again, were a way for engines to remain in operation while the wagon was away getting refueled or watered up. Here we have the last of our 19 and 65 horsepower Port Hurons. This is a part of the Gould family collection. They're out of Naperville, Illinois. Looks like we have Joe and Whitney up there at the controls today. They have their own water tender wagon behind them as well. Another interesting feature of the Port Huron line, if you notice, all of the cleats on the rear wheels we've seen so far, aside from the other Port Hurons, have been bolted on. These lugs are actually cast into the wheel themselves, and in their sales literature, in their sales literature, They were marketed as being self-cleaning, that they would never get fouled up with mud. Whether or not that was a sales gimmick or not is yet to be determined almost 100 years later. This is built in 1919, again, by Port Huron Threshing Machine Company, Port Huron, Michigan, just across the St. Clair River from Sarnia, Ontario. Any whistles? All right, thank you, guys. Case was king when it came to steam engines, but Advanced Rumley was hot on their tails for the entire time these engines were being produced. They are arguably the second most prolific manufacturer of traction engines during the age of steam. And this is one such machine. This is an 18-horse Advanced Rumley, part of the Universal line of engines. They were branded as Universals because they could do universally anything. It's a single-cylinder engine. It is a single simple, meaning that steam leaves the boiler, does only one batch of work in the single cylinder before going straight out the stack. This is the most common arrangement of traction engine that you'll see here in the States. We've got the Hate to Shot model today. Any whistles? All right, thanks, guys. This is part of the Malsh family collection out of Pell Lake, Wisconsin. Coming up next, this is the second and only other double-cylinder engine we have on the showgrounds this year. This is a 22-horse product of the Keck Garnerman Company out of Mount Vernon, Indiana. Interesting to note is it has two flywheels attached to it. One of them is to actually put the belt pulley on. That's the one on the flywheel, or on the bleacher side of the parade route. The other one's just for added stored momentum, that it helped the engine run a little bit smoother and give it just a little bit more efficiency in pulling power. Again, a double simple design, meaning steam does one batch of work in each cylinder before being exhausted out the stack. Another interesting feature of this machine are the side tanks. This is for added water capacity. Owned by the Staley family of DeKalb, Illinois. Looks like we got Kayla at the throttle today. All right, cool. Any whistles? Thanks for bringing it through, guys. A lot of companies around 1912 to 1915 decided to update their lines of traction engines, and Minneapolis was no exception. They dropped a lot of their older models and post-1916 offered three sizes, a 20, 24, and 28 horse. We've seen two 20 horses so far. This is the only 24 horse Minneapolis we have this year at the show. A part of the Luton's family collection of West Chicago, Illinois. It's just a little bit bigger and a little more powerful than the 20 horse. Very well suited for drawbar work, just as it is belt work. These have a lower gear ratio, which gives them a little bit more power on the drawbar. Again, it features the trademark Minneapolis head tank. It's a single, simple engine design. Features an aftermarket capacity to protect the machinery and an auxiliary water pump. There are several ways to put water in these boilers, one of which is a steam-powered injector, which runs off of the Venturi effect. This machine has a duplex steam pump, which can put water in at lower pressures. The injectors need higher pressures, the pumps don't. Any whistles, guys? I think that's the only one. All right, perfect. Again, part of the Luton's collection, West Chicago, Illinois. Thanks for bringing it through, guys. Steam didn't last on the American farm, however, and you may be surprised to know that most of these steam engines you've seen so far were built in the mid-teens and 20s. They were already arguably obsolete by the time they were produced. This machine here, this is a Rumley oil pull, and is a step in the evolution away from steam power on the American farm. It was built in 1920 as a peer of the steam engines for what it had going for it. It's a little cleaner by that point in time. Petrol and kerosene were easy to get hold of. It's part of the Hoffman collection. It's a Model 8, 16 horsepower.